Yep. Today we're talking about that great bugbear of all writers, the dreaded writer's block monster. Writer's block, put simply, is just the name we give to our mental state when we find it difficult to write. It happens at the beginning of a project, when we don't know how to start. At the end of a project, when we're not sure how to finish. And most often in the middle of a project, when we don't know where to go next. But whenever it happens, writer's block is always a symptom of a break in flow. Flow is something that we're all seeking, in writing as much as anywhere else. It's the athlete who's in the zone, the gamer who's fully immersed in the puzzle she's solving, the actor who disappears into his role, the writer when the story feels like it's telling itself. The challenge is, for a lot of us, getting into flow is difficult. It takes a good amount of time, energy, and focus to start the wheel spinning efficiently. It's a lot easier to get knocked out of flow than to just jump back into it. Now, flow itself is a pretty deep concept with decades of research behind it, and I've done a lot of research on it, but I'm not a clinical psychologist, so I can't claim that kind of expertise. I'll do a different video on that fully goes into writing in flow, but just keep in mind that it is something that we're trying to get into. We're trying to pursue that so we can produce more and better work. And the frustrations of writer's block come about because we're unable to even come close to getting into flow. Now, I don't claim to have found the secret to getting into the flow state. I have no such claims. But in my decades of doing this, I have learned a few tricks that help me and have helped my students get closer to flow and move in the direction of flow. The first tip is something I picked up from some of my favorite contemporary writers who say that, in no uncertain words, there is no such thing as writer's block. This can be frustrating for a lot of us to hear because if there was no such thing, why would we have a term for it that is so well known, that names a seemingly universal experience that just about any writer has had at some point or another? What do we mean when we say there's no such thing as writer's block when we're finding ourselves blocked? Well, I don't think those authors are denying the existence of the experience of writer's block. From my point of view, at least, what they're reminding us is that writer's block doesn't exist out there. It's not real as something out there in the real world that's imposed upon us. When you're blocked, when you're facing writer's block, it's entirely in here. It's entirely mental, which means that ultimately it's you doing it to yourself. It's not some external pressure that's blocking you. You yourself are blocking yourself. Writer's block has not been imposed upon you. It's not a real thing. It's a mental thing. The problem is when we encapsulate all these experiences of frustration with writing, all these different things that could possibly stop us or give us sticking points or slow us down in our writing process, and we give it a single name like writer's block, we give power to that concept and we allow it to have power over us. When we say, I have writer's block, we're subconsciously telling ourselves that there is something real out there blocking us from doing our writing. There isn't. The writer's block monster is all in our heads. So before you build writer's block into an impenetrable wall that overwhelms you and crushes your creative spirit, remind yourself it's not real. Don't make a mountain out of a handful of anthills. Now, for some of the time, of course, this just isn't enough. We may tell ourselves consciously and fully believe that there's no such thing as writer's block out there, and yet something internally, subconsciously, still has us feeling creatively blocked. So my second trick to deal with writer's block involves attacking the problem directly. So what do I do when I'm blocked? I write about writer's block. This is something I have all my students do whenever they're blocked. Write about writer's block. Now, oftentimes, this turns into a just cuss-filled screed. But after a couple paragraphs or a few pages of F-bombs and rants and just angry, irritated, non-grammatical prose, something starts to come out of it. And eventually, it starts to turn me back to my project with energy that I can then use to start writing. And suddenly, seemingly suddenly, even though it's been a little while, I'm past my block and I can write again. And I'm back in my project and I'm getting closer and closer to flow. But first, I just have to attack the problem. I have to write about writer's block and put it in its place and show it who's boss. This is because getting into flow requires action. No one dives into flow from stasis. You have to be moving. You have to be a participant before flow can come. And that is an active participant, not a passive participant, not a watcher, not a sit and waiter. You don't wait for inspiration to strike before you start writing. You start writing, and then hopefully inspiration comes. And if you have no inspiration, you have no idea where to go yet, write about writer's block, and eventually something's going to happen. See, when we feel writer's block and we surrender to it and we give in to the block, we don't write. And when you don't write, you preclude even the possibility of getting into flow. You let writer's block win by letting it win, by saying, I am blocked, I'm creatively blocked, I have writer's block, I can't write, and so therefore you don't write, you're never going to get out of it. You have to start acting. And so one way, as I say, to do that is to attack the writer's block. But sometimes it isn't a lack of creative energy that causes the block. Instead, the problem might arise from our own perfectionism. It isn't that we couldn't think of anything to write, it's that everything we think of, nothing feels good enough. Now this, of course, is because we're judging ourselves by the wrong standard at that point. We think to ourselves, well, that idea isn't good enough for publication, or no one's going to want to read that, before we even write the idea down. This perfectionism stops storytelling in its tracks. This feeling of being less than leaves us stuck in the idea, outline, or drafting stages with no possibilities of moving forward. Our project withers on the branch. And this is where my third trick comes in, which is write terribly. Yeah, you heard me correctly. Write bad. Listen to what I'm saying here. I'm not saying to just ignore your own perfectionism and try to write whatever without caring about quality. Chances are, if this is your problem, if the angst, the anxiety of being imperfect, of being less than you want to be, is stopping you from writing, you've probably already tried to ignore that voice. You've already tried to ignore that little editor in the back of your mind that tells you your work could be better, could always be better. Why is it not better? You can't ignore that little voice. It just keeps talking over you. You do everything you can to ignore it. Well, I'm telling you, don't ignore it. Accept it. Say, you're right. Everything's going to be terrible. Everything's going to be the worst thing ever. Don't try to write okay. Don't just be satisfied with okay. Write badly. Write cookie cutter characters in unclear setting. Ignore the rules of cause and effect, of setup and payoff. Forget plot and structure altogether, or just blatantly follow a stale formula. Draft stodgy dialogue, generic descriptions, and confusing action scenes. Tell when you should show and show when you should tell. Liberally employ cliches. Be redundant all over again. Ignore grammar guidelines at will. Pen puerile, pretentious, and downright painful prose. In short, this third tip, your goal is to intentionally write something that sucks. Make it suck. Make it the worst thing you can possibly write. Now, why am I suggesting you to do this? Because I want you to suck? No. Is it because I'm crazy? Possibly, but I have my reasons. It's because you need to get out of the locked house in your own head and burn that house down behind you, along with that portrait of perfection on the mantle inside that you've been attached to for so long. If you're going to be a writer, you have to get past the notion that your work can be perfect. It can't. Perfect is out of our reach, no matter how good we are. Which means that you shouldn't expect your rough draft to be even halfway good. Rough drafts are terrible by their very nature. That's why they're called rough. It's not going to be good, and that's okay. In writing, in drafting, if you're ever going to get something done, you have to give yourself permission to suck. You have to give yourself permission to suck in the early stages. And giving yourself permission sometimes starts with making it mandatory. If you're having trouble allowing yourself to suck, force yourself to. There's no choice. You have to try to write as badly as you can. And once you've done the exercise and you've just written the worst thing you can possibly think of, reread the dreck you've just produced. You're right in your expectations. A lot of it is going to be awful. But you might find little gems in there, or sparks of ideas that inspire you to a new kick of creativity. More importantly though, even if you don't find anything like that, this exercise is going to show you that bad writing won't kill you. It won't even hurt you, nor is it going to hurt anybody else unless you are a doctor writing bad prescriptions, in which case please don't. But otherwise, if you're a writer, your first draft is going to suck, and that's not going to hurt anybody. It's not even going to hurt you. You don't even have to show it to anyone. No one needs to know how terrible your first drafts are, ever in your life. You can keep that to yourself. You can only show the finished product or more polished product before being edited. Rough drafts are going to suck, so force them to. One more benefit from this exercise is that you're going to prove to yourself that you know what bad writing is, because you've shown that you can do it. You've gotten really good at bad writing. And that's not a bad thing, because if you understand what bad writing is, then you can recognize what might need to be fixed in order to make it good writing. You take a practice, and you really have to get to know what good writing is too, but understanding what bad writing is and showing yourself that you know what bad writing is and that you know how to do it will give you a direction to go in. And the better you can recognize bad writing, the better you can fix it. Each of these tricks is something that I have used many times to get myself out of writer's block. And I teach my creative writing students to do the same. This is not something new that I'm just making up for this video. This is something, all of these techniques are things that I've done and they have worked. Are they going to work for you? I don't know. I can't guarantee that. But if you give them a try, if you are blocked right now, again, to recap, first, remind yourself that writer's block doesn't exist. It's not out there waiting to get you. It's entirely self-created. If that doesn't work, just write about writer's block. Vent your spleen at it. Pour forth your rage and hatred at the thing that's blocking you from writing. If that doesn't get your wheels turning enough, that doesn't make you start writing your project again, then write the worst thing you can think of. Twist the spigot and just let pour forth the most terrible words and sentences you can, and inspire yourself to greater heights of terribleness. And you will kick the block aside. I hope these tips help you with your writer's block. Guys, please leave a comment down below if you try them out. Let me know how well they work for you, or if you have other techniques that you use when you're blocked to get you past writer's block. I would love to learn more. So please leave them in the comments below. And please, if you found this video helpful, subscribe to the channel, like the video, and share it with all your friends. I really, really appreciate it. And thank you guys again for watching. And until next time, good luck and good writing. Peace.